The opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the speakers and presenters. They do not represent the opinions or views of the Equita Group, Equita Final Expense Services, or its affiliates.
Hello, everybody. Chase Urick here, fired up about the podcast today. First and foremost, we appreciate each and every one of you that are joining us live in real time, plugged in right now to the EFES In the Trenches podcast. And those of you that are listening, whether it be via iTunes or the Google Play, we appreciate you joining us. Whether there's a delay or if you're in real time, doesn't matter to us. We just appreciate you guys engaging and being a part of this. The reason I'm excited about today's podcast is we've got another awesome guest with us today. We've got Richard Landis on with us. If you didn't get the marketing material, if you're in podcast land and you don't work with EFES right now, that's okay. Get your pen and paper handy. You're going to get an opportunity to learn a little bit about and who Richard Landis is. Richard is an awesome top producer. We've been saying it for over a year, an up-and-comer. You figure that out, not just after getting a chance to meet him, but after you have the opportunity to spend some time with him. He helps people in the group chat whenever he's able to. He's active. He's participating, and he's a student of the game. He'll be the first to tell you. You'll probably hear today on the podcast. He'll tell you he doesn't have it all figured out, but he is a student of the game, and he's getting better. Tell you a little bit about Richard. $230,000 in personal production in 2018. He had over 339 applications. That's just the final expense business. That has nothing to do with Medicare. That does not include those numbers. So I'm excited today to spend some time, and I hope you guys enjoy the conversation that we're going to have with Richard Landis. And with that being said, let's get rolling. Get you opened up. Good morning, man. We appreciate you spending some time with us. How you doing this morning?
Good morning, buddy. I'm blessed. How are you?
I got no complaints. It's Friday. We got you on the podcast, so it's all good. I appreciate you jumping on and spending some time with us. And in our prep work, I know that we didn't really have much prep work, you and I, on this because we always wanted to be organic. But in our conversation, we kind of ran through. You've been on the other calls, the other podcasts, and you've heard how we do what we do here. So we like to kind of start at the top for everybody who may be new to the podcast or just don't know you. Let's start at the genesis of it. When did you first get into this crazy business that we're in that we love so much?
I first got licensed in 2013, and I was selling indemnity health insurance plans over the phone, and I ended up, they opened up a final expense kind of part, trying to try that out. And I ended up getting on there and actually did very well. I really enjoyed final expense. I enjoyed the people that I was talking to and kind of the stories that I got to hear from the people. And ended up kind of going to another call center and working. And I became the manager of that call center, kind of started running it for a little while. And I kind of got a job offer at the time that was hard to pass up. And I went and did that for a company for a while, and they ended up going out of business. But whenever they went out of business, I kind of started trying to do it on my own, selling final expense. I only had $600 in the bank. But I knew that I loved doing it, and I hopped on the phone. I got a dialer, and I just started making thousands of dialers, calling people trying to sell final expense. And go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interject. I know that you were successful at selling it over the phone, and you were doing very well. And I know that you've had conversations with many of us, whether it's road show or whenever we've had a chance to spend some time together. What was your first impression of the face-to-face compared to over the phone? How different was that?
It was night and day. Just to give a little background on the phone sales, I worked very hard. I wrote about $176,000 over the phone. and I loved it. I won the Liberty Bankers Life trip, but over the phone is a very, very hard sell, and persistency's hard. But the first time that I ever went face-to-face, I was kind of nervous. I never rode out with anybody. I'd never done it. And I called Ben Bowman. I told him I kind of had some butterflies, and he kind of coached me through this about a year and a half ago. And I went and knocked on the door, and it was just night and day difference. They were over the phone. People are just naturally hostile, whereas in person, that kind of smoke cloud, that anger over the phone goes away. It's just a friendly person, and the whole close, asking for social or bank account. The first time I ever did that in person, they just gave it to me. There was no battle. There was no fight. Whenever I sold over the phone, when I would get to the social or the bank account, I would close my eyes. I'd get my pen ready, but I'd close my eyes because I knew that's when the battle was going to begin. I don't like to give my social over the phone. I don't like to give my bank info over the phone. Whereas in person, they hop up and go get the checkbook. Is it going to be coming out each month? Not every time, but it's so much easier than selling it over the phone.
Yeah, and I remember in our conversations, one of the first lunches that we had together, you had mentioned that the big difference for you, the glaring difference, was the persistency. You've continued to evolve in the business and improve. And we're going to talk about the evolution, how you've continued to move forward. If you had to identify, and it's not right or wrong either way, a lot of people say, hey, I'm a little bit of both. But for those of us out there or those in the audience that are wanting to get to know you a little bit more, door knocker, appointment setter, both. How do you go about, trying to get in front of the client?
I recommend both. I am more of a phone person because I come from the phone background. I would rather set as many appointments as I can, and I have a little bit different approach than a lot of people. I buy a bunch of leads. I'm a bulk person. And I like to go through and pick the ones that I like. It helps me be able to pick and choose the business that I get now because I'm not desperate for a sale. I've got 39 other people to go see, But I recommend, if you can, if you've got enough leads, call them to them first, setting as many appointments as you can. And then the ones that say that they're not interested or no phone number or disconnected number or just rude and hang up on you, I swing by and knock on the door, normally a couple days later or the next week once I'm done calling through setting appointments first.
That's awesome. And I want to ask this question because I know we had a great In the Trenches last week with Roger Chan, your buddy. And one of the things that Roger had talked about, and I always thought that this was very powerful in his story when he spoke with everybody and shares his story, is Roger was bloody knuckles all the time. He was a door knocking machine. And then after hearing Josh Jensen do a live dialing session, he said, you know what, I'm going to do this. He did it, and he's become very proficient at it. And he's great at doing both now. He's very well-rounded in how he approaches the leads. Has that worked in reverse for you, coming from the telesale side of things? Have you seen, look, I have a great, I give great phone, as they would say, but now getting into the face-to-face side of it, have you found yourself to become more proficient and successful with door knocking as the more you've done it over the past year and a half?
Yeah, absolutely, because I was talking to an agent the other day, and he thought that door knocking was kind of a waste of time, that he could do it all over the phone, which is nice in principle, in theory, but you'd have to buy an awful lot of leads to be able to just call and set appointments, because over half of my business last year was from door knocks, from knocking on the door, because some people you call, they've been called 4 times that day by other telemarketers, or I'm not saying we're telemarketers, they gave us permission to call, but people call for free knee braces, free Medicare. While I'm sitting with them, they'll get 4 phone calls sometimes, and they'll sometimes cuss that person out and hang up on it. And they did the same thing to me, But whenever I knocked on the door, they are the nicest, friendliest people. Come on in. They don't even know why I'm there. But they just cussed 3 people out on the phone, not because they're angry, hateful people, just because they're tired of getting called every day. And
Right.
even us at a young age, we experience it, but seniors get called an obnoxious amount of times sometimes. So if they're rude to you over the phone, don't take no sweat off of it. It just wasn't the right day to call them. Go knock on that door, and it's going to be a completely different person.
That's awesome, man. That is 100% factual. I find myself doing it as well. We, like you said, we get beat up with phone calls as well. Probably not even close to the degree that the seniors do, but I still find myself like, dude, I know this is a telemarketer. I know this is not someone I know or someone that's reaching out to me legitimately. This is somebody trying to solicit me. Whenever you do, and we're not going to ask for the full script today. We'll do that on another podcast when we get you on next. But whenever they do tell you no over the phone, do you automatically throw those into your I'm going to door knock them anyway stack and go out and see them face to face?
Typically, yes. Okay. Once they tell me no one time over the phone, I normally move on. And used to, I would call them maybe another day or another time. But I just have a lot of leads in now. I don't really have time to hit them 2 or 3 times. You know, I got to move on to the next batch because if I don't hit them, I got 40 more coming on Friday, you know?
Yeah. Time is money, man. You only have so much time. I hear you. One thing that we love to talk about when we get somebody of your caliber on the podcast is we love to talk about your goals. I think goals are, you know, Ben Bowman talks about it. Peter Walker talks about it for both the final expense and the Medicare side of things. Goals are important. Let's talk about how your goals differ from when you first got started to where you're at now. When you first got into the business, what were your goals when you first got going?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay. Sorry about that. I had a call coming in. That's a good question, a funny question. Whenever I first started, I was basically an appointment setter. I called a fronter. I sat on one side, and I got the person interested, and I transferred them to the agent. And I did that for like 2 weeks, and I saw this agent over there. I was doing the hard work, and they were making the money. And so after 2 weeks, I went and talked to the boss, told him I wanted to be an agent, got my license, got everything going. And whenever I started selling, I told everybody, I just want to make $1,000 a week. If I could just make $1,000 in 1 week, I'll be happy. And I hit it for the first time. And then whenever I hit 1,000, I was like, you know what, $1,500. I want to make $1,500 in a week. And my family was very poor. We were raised very poor. So $1,000 a week to me was a lot of money. Some of my family made that in a month or 2 or 3 weeks, you know. And so I just kept hitting those goals, and I kept wanting to make more, $2,000. Then the first time I made $3,000 in a week. And I was so excited. Most people, they don't like talking about money, but I'll tell you, I'm not afraid to talk about money because I love money and I'm passionate about making more of it. And whenever I was on the phone, I really just wanted to average $2,000 a week, bring home for me. And now over face-to-face, it's completely reversed because before $2,000 a week is what I wanted to make, and now that's what my expenses are, about $2,000 a week after my leads, my car, my fronter, or my appointment setter, all my expenses. So it's a completely different game. So whenever I first came on board, I was hoping that I could do the same face-to-face I did on the phone, which was $176,000. And then once I kind of saw these other producers, there was a guy named Roger Chan and a couple others writing $30,000 a month. And my first month I wrote $18,000, but I couldn't wrap my mind around how are these people. I'm busting. I'm working as hard as I can to write that $18,000, and these people are making $30,000, $40,000 one month. And so I messaged Roger. I was like, what are you doing, man? Like, what do I got to do to get on that level? And at the time, he was taking 30 leads a week. I was doing 20. I immediately bumped it up to 30. I want to do what that guy's doing. And we ended up being kind of best friends, and I talked to him like 2 hours a day, but we drive each other in different goals. And so my goals to begin, I wanted to do what I did over the phone. This year, I really wanted to write $250,000. I fell a little bit short of it. I wrote a little over $230,000, and I added in a bunch of Medicare, which is actually awesome and worth the switch there. I lost a little bit of final expense, but I've gained a lot of residuals with my Medicare. But my goals now, this year, really, I really just want to write about $200,000. But I want to find some other agents, some other people, maybe even people that are struggling, and I want to help them get to the level I am. You know, I love making money, but I really want to help some other people kind of get going, because it's an awesome business, and once you get past that rough part, it's smooth sailing.
Yeah, and I mean, we see you helping people, you know, in the group chat, which we love, in the community. That's awesome. It's been a lot of fun to be there and kind of see how you've matured in the business and how you've grown and evolved, as I mentioned before. Before we get into the mechanical side of things, and we're going to do some mechanics, I want to know about your routine, and I think a lot of people on this call would love to know how a $230,000 a year producer does what he does each and every day. I feel it's important, it's imperative on all of our parts here, and I'd be irresponsible if I did not ask, you know, how big of a difference in a short amount of time has the Medicare made impact-wise to your business? Because I know you were like, dude, I got to do this testing. I don't know if I want to do it, the certification. But you jumped in and you spent time with Peter. And as Peter does, and everybody who's worked with Peter knows, if Peter tells you something, you can take it to the bank. You know, how has this changed your business so far, incorporating Medicare in with the final expense?
It is, gosh, that's an awesome question too, because the year before I came to Equita EFES, I had somebody kind of go over Medicare with me a little bit. I did my AHIP, and I didn't even do the carrier training. I did the AHIP, spent all that time, didn't do the carrier training. I just kept on selling final expense. And the next year, everybody I came on board with you guys, and everybody started adding in Medicare, these top producers. And Peter would call me, you know, once every week or two and be like, why aren't you doing it, man? You would be so great at this. And I'd talk to Roger every day, and he got his done. He started getting Medicare sales, and he just basically called me and told me that I'm very foolish. I should slap myself because I'm throwing away so much money. And I went ahead, I logged in, and I did it. I was kind of scared of it at first because everybody talks about, you know, compliance and how hard it is and how much stuff there is to know and the different plans. But when you can have somebody come out and show you in person how to do it, you know, this is what you do, this is how you be compliant, it just made it so much less scary and actually easy. And I just took to loving it because you're not allowed to call them free or, you know, really say certain things about Medicare, but a lot of times they call Medicare producers order takers because you're giving away something. You know, they're getting a lot of benefits, and they pay very little or nothing out of their own pocket. So really the same people I'm seeing, sometimes they'd tell me, oh, I thought this was Medicare, or I wanted this, and I would just move on. I was losing that money. And this month alone, I've had over $15,000 in deposits from Medicare. And wow. I started like 8 or 9 months ago. I haven't been doing it very long, and that's game-changing money.
It is, and I'm glad you brought that up. And I want to hit on one point that you made that I think for those that are in the audience listening live, or if you are in podcast land listening, and once again, you don't even work with us, I think a big part that you just touched on there is it can feel overwhelming. The Medicare from the outside looking in has a lot of moving parts. But when you get the opportunity to spend some time with Peter, and particularly he comes out and spends time with you in the car and in the home, it does provide relief and relieve some of the stress, right? I mean, you just mentioned that when you're with him, he really kind of simplifies the whole process and the whole market to where, man, it's not as bad as I thought it was. It's not the 800-pound gorilla I thought that was going to smash me. it really eases your mind on the whole thing by educating you, right?
Absolutely. It makes it just so clear because you're so scared of it. But then I basically had appointments with my own clients, people I'd already sold before and that I already had a good relationship with, that at the time had told me maybe they were interested in Medicare or different things. And I'm pretty good at keeping notes. But I went and saw some of the people I've already seen, and he showed me how to help those people. And so many times with Medicare, it's a different ball game. They're happy when you leave. They're giving you hugs. They're saying, I am so glad I let you in my door today. I'm so sorry I was rude to you on the phone yesterday. Because you save them money on their prescriptions. You help them with their vision. If they need dental work, if there's certain things that you can actually help them with, life insurance is kind of intangible. They cannot touch it or see it or feel it or use it. Whereas Medicare, it's a card that they get in the mail. It's something that they use every single day, every week. And it's powerful when you can help them. And it makes me feel good every day whenever I leave. If I'm getting beat up, which happens in final expense, I'll go 2 or 3 or 4, and they're just beating me down. And then somebody I had talked to before, and I could help them get a Medicare, it just changes up the week, and sometimes it puts me in a better mood because the people that I'm helping actually appreciate it and enjoy it that much more.
Yeah, it's invaluable. I mean, it's huge in terms of you're able to, if you're a race car driver, you're not just rolling with with 6, with 4 cylinders. You're rolling with a full 8, and it really is a game changer because they're married. We talk about this all the time. I know that the business development department talks about it. You guys talk about it when you're discussing the opportunity with a new agent. I just don't think many of us know about it initially when we first get going, that these two markets are really married. And guys, right now, if you're on this podcast listening in, once again, whether it's live or in podcast land, jump on the Medicare Madness calls with Peter and Cole. You will learn a lot just from in one episode with listening to Peter and Cole talk about the market. It'll definitely intrigue your interest and kind of get you interested to know more. And we can get you hooked up with Peter. And if you don't know how, just let us know. But it's a huge game changer for you. And I didn't want to turn this into, and make it seem like this is a commercial for Medicare. But at the end of the day, if you have a life insurance license and you are visiting with seniors in the final expense market, you are missing out, I'll say, if you're not involving yourself in the Medicare space, because, those days, like you just mentioned, Richard, where you get beat up, which will happen, the Medicare is still there. So as we kind of go to the mechanical side of things now, I want to talk with you about, and this is something we get hit up a lot about when we have somebody of your caliber on the call. Hey, how does Chris Smith do this? How does Roger do that? How does Lovely Johnson do this? I'd love to know a little bit about your routine, because that's one of the most sought after items on these podcasts is, hey, find out, does Richard work 2 days a week? He works 5. He works harder than I thought. They love to know what your schedule looks like. So if you don't mind, let's start with your daily routine. What do you do when the sun comes up and then when it goes down? How does your day look?
Okay. And just to kind of go over that too with my past routine, because whenever I first started, I had a way different routine than I do now, okay? When I first started, I typically worked 6 or 7 days a week, and I was getting 20 leads a week, sometimes in 2 or 3 counties if it fell at a weird time, or just moving on to the next area. And I like rural areas. I do a lot of driving, a lot of window time because I like country folk. And I would fill my car up twice a day. I put thousands of miles on my Raptor. When I first started, I worked very hard because with 20 leads, my first month, I wrote $18,000 in business, which is good. To write $18,000 on 20 leads, you really have to be working hard, especially when you first start getting leads. You don't have any older leads or anything you can fall on. You're getting that fresh leads, and maybe if you can afford some bonus or Facebook leads. But I couldn't really at first. I just had to make as much money out of those 20 leads as I could, okay? So whenever I first started, my schedule was get up and go every day. Now I have it a little bit easier. I have one admin day a week, and I haven't worked a weekend in a while. I typically was taking off Mondays. That was my admin day. And then the rest of the week, I try with 40 leads to have at least 2 full days of appointments, 8, 9, 10 appointments out of calling through. And then I have a day or 2 of knocking doors, hitting those other people. And my appointment setter still calls and set me appointments for those other days. But sometimes there's not enough to have the full week's worth just full of appointments every day without knocking in between. So I typically nowadays I work 4 days a week, and I drop my son off at school at 7:50, and typically I'm on the door heading to my first appointment, which I normally set at about 9 o'clock, and I try to run appointments every hour on the hour until 6 o'clock. 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 10 appointments. Some days I got a little less. And what I like to do is on those days where it's full of appointments, I go hit them. And if they don't answer the door or I can't get a hold of them, I put them into a stack. And those are the ones that I kind of primarily focus on knocking because I've already talked to them before. And just sometimes people forget, they go to the gas station, they're gone out to eat, or they just tried to avoid me. But whenever I knock on that door another time and they don't know who it is, they'll answer, "Oh, it's you." And sometimes they try to put you off, but I just, do I need to take my shoes off before I come in? As polite as you can, and typically they'll let you in and at least let you give a presentation if possible.
This is good stuff, man. I love it. And so when you talk about your daily routine, as we kind of branch off, you talked about your office day. Let's look at your whole schedule for the week. What are your days of operation? What are your days where you're finally taking a little bit of a breather and relaxing?
Tuesday through Friday, I run as hard as I can, no relaxing, because I used to work 6-7 days a week. I've cut down days, but I didn't want to cut down production. So in those 4 days, I have to work 6 or 7 days worth of work. So Mondays are normally pretty easy office days. The other days, I'm constantly nonstop running to appointments. If this one no-shows me, then I'll drive back to the one that no-showed me earlier or the day before. But I don't take much breaks. I don't sit down and eat at a restaurant typically. Me and my brother, we went and ate at a restaurant the other day, but it was the first time in like 2 or 3 months. I take sandwiches or I get fast food, and I normally kind of eat it on the way to where I'm going. So a couple bathroom breaks, but I don't normally on those 4 days, I work as hard as I can because I've got a lot of expenses. So if I slack even a little bit, they'll overcome me. So I constantly am pounding so that way I can make as much money as I can and live as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, you just touched on something that I think is it's a common trait, and it's a trend that you see with pretty much every successful producer. I revert back to when we had, Chris Smith on, and when we had Roger on, and Ben has mentioned this as well. Time is not wasted. Ben's not, as you mentioned before, he's not going to Bass Pro Shop to check out a new rod and reel. Roger's not stopping to eat a 45-minute to an hour-long lunch. When you're out there, as Chris mentioned, when you're out there, you have so many hours in the day. When we're out there, we go to work, we're ready to work, and that's what we're doing. So that's a powerful message, and it's a trend and a trait that you see with every successful producer. Hey, look, do what I got to do, but I've only got so much time, and it takes time to get to point A to point B. I only have so much time, and I can't waste it. So I appreciate you sharing that routine with us. Let's talk about, as we love talking about, 230,000 last year. You killed it. You're doing great in Medicare. Let's talk about some of the blemishes. We've all got them. What would you say your number one bad habit is that you have right now, currently, that just kind of plagues you a bit?
I've got two kind of habits that I think are bad because I don't really work my lapses the way that I should, is the first one. Most people, you get a lapse, you immediately go knock on the door, try to fix that policy. And I do sometimes if I'm in that area, but I'll try to call them once or twice. And if I'm in the area, I will. But I get so many leads. Normally by the time I get a lapse or not taken, I'm already on to the next county or the county after. You know, I'm 3 or 4 hours away from the spot that I was. So I don't work my lapses as well as I can because I buy so many fresh leads that I just don't have time to swing by and try to fix, you know, everyone or every person. I've got 4 fresh people to see in the time it would take me to go to that area and work that policy, okay? So luckily, I'm very compassionate, and I try to put people on the right plan. So my persistency is still pretty high. My main carrier, I ran it this morning, was 80%, 13-month persistency. And that's not bad, but I feel like it could be better if I would take the time to drive out there and work those lapses like I should. I think that's my first bad habit. And then my second one, I don't get any referrals. I've probably had, with Medicare, it's a little different. I'll get people calling me who want to get Medicares, but I don't ask for referrals in the house because I just don't have time. My 4 days, I normally have 10 appointments every single day most of the time. So I don't really have time to go talk to their families and their cousins and their sisters. I did whenever I didn't have as many leads. I had to do stuff like that to make my lead cost, you know, my PPL or whatever that the code is, how much you make per lead. So I had to add that in because I didn't have a whole lot of leads. But I buy a lot of leads now, so some of my bad habits is overtaken by fresh business, if that makes sense.
It does, and to be honest, Richard, it blows my mind that you just threw out there that you're not as efficient as you would like to be in the referrals, because you did it here in Dallas when we had the road show. You talked about rapport building, and it's just my short time knowing you. You're probably one of the most likable guys, and I know that the seniors love you when you visit with them. It makes sense when you say I just don't have enough time. I appreciate you sharing those two with us because I know you're going to get better at the persistency side of it in terms of the following up on the lapses and stuff. You do have a very good quality of business block. But it did kind of surprise me to hear you say the referral side because you're very, very good when it comes to, you know, spending time with them during the warm-up, during the rapport building stage before you even get into the actual presentation. So that's good stuff, man. I appreciate you sharing that with us. As we talk about, you know, going into not necessarily working your book of business, but have you found working leads and having people that you've come in contact with? You mentioned this earlier. I just want to expand upon it a little bit, staying on the client relations side of things. Being able to visit with people that you had seen prior and able to reach back out to for Medicare, have you seen a high volume of people that you were able to get back with and take care of them on Medicare that originally, before you got involved with Medicare, you just couldn't do anything with, or you thought it was a lost cause?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was kind of an eye-opener because that's actually maybe one of my third flaws is I don't really have time to work my book of business during the week because I've got so many appointments. Soon I'm not going to be having as many appointments because I'm going to be doing it on my own. My brother won't be my appointment setter anymore. And I'm really going to focus on working my book of business and my older lapses. But anytime I rode with Peter or I called one of my clients, they're always so friendly. Oh, yeah, how are you? How are your kids? And they already trust you. They already know it's a good thing. You helped them before. And
right.
I came from the phone. You know, I never wanted to talk to them again after I sold them whenever I was on the phone because when you sold on the phone, if somebody was calling, it was to cancel. It's not for anything good. So it's completely different face to face. And you can call those people, you can knock on the door a year or two later. They're still going to be just as friendly with you the last time you talked to them. They just trust you even more because you had a year's worth of time protecting their family. So definitely visit and work your book and talk to your older clients, because it's especially with Medicare, so easy to help them with something that they truly need.
I revert back to a story that James Irwin told me after getting a chance to spend some time with Peter, and this was it was a very powerful story, and I won't go through the whole thing, but where they were able to, I may have shared this before, they were able to save somebody, I think, $200+, whether it was on medications or something else, and the person's eyes just kind of started tearing up, and they were so happy that James and Peter had come by, and they were able to then convert those savings into life insurance. That's what it's all about right there, going in, and that's that feeling you were mentioning before, being able to help somebody, with a tangible product compared to the intangible, and it's a win-win. So let's talk about the not-so-friendly people or the not-so-friendly days. When you run into those that slam the door in your face or you just can't give it away, let's talk about your mentality. You've got a bulldog mentality. In the short amount of time I've known you, you've just been a grinder. I've never once, number one, heard you complain, even when there was, weeks in the beginning where you had, you never once picked the phone up and complained and said, Chase, what's going on with my leads? I think there was maybe 2 weeks where, 2 weeks in a row where you had leads in 2 or 3 different counties and you were doing some cleanup. You've got a bulldog mentality, man. Let's talk about those days where you're just getting beat up. What's your mentality? What's your approach to the day where you just can't give it away and nobody wants to buy?
It's something that I've definitely worked with, because luckily I've always been fairly talented. People do like me, as you say. They can tell that I mean what I say. I'm genuine, that I'm trying to help them find the best thing for them. So sometimes it's not too hard. But for anybody that listens to Ben's calls in the morning, this last Friday, I had 10 appointments, and I got 0 deals. And Monday, I had 10 appointments, and I got 0 deals. I went 20 appointments with nothing. And that was a little bit of a blow to me. It's been a long, long time since something like that's happened. Normally, I may get a couple no's, but then the big yeses are right there, And I actually had to take some head knocks, some rude people. I had 6 or 7 doors in a row where the person would not answer the door. And it's not a norm, but I guess it happens to everybody, because it sure happened to me. But I don't know if it was Jensen or who it was, somebody said one time, ride the wave. Don't get too excited when you get a sell. Don't get too excited or too mad or upset when somebody's rude to you. I just try to stay level. And if that last person was rude to me or they didn't buy, I don't care, because I know it's a numbers game. If I show up at enough people's houses with a smile on my face, one of them is going to say, yeah, you know what, I remember filling that card out. I don't have anything. I need something. And I know I'm going to get a deal eventually. So I ride the wave. I try to stay as calm as possible. And sometimes I still get mad. I go out in the car and think some crazy thoughts, but I hoofraba. I just move on. And if you do, you'll run into somebody that's sweet, or that you can save $200 a month, that's crying when you leave because they loved you so much. And the ups outweigh the bads. And I know that. So when there's a bad, I just keep on chugging.
I love it, man. And to go along with what you're saying, last night, if you guys were in the chat last night in the community, you saw that. Perseverance. You're going to get beat up. You're going to get punched in the nose. You saw Jeff Poach throw out a ding or two. It was 2, actually. Over $6,000 in premium, and it was the 6th time he had stopped by to knock on the door. And we hear those types of testimonials and experiences all the time where you just keep going. And to what you were saying as well, I mean, you could get beat up all day long, and it's one of those where you're just dog cussing when you get back in the car, like you mentioned. But if you don't fire the engine up and you don't get to that last door to knock on, that last door to knock on could be that one sale that changes your day and changes your week. So, I mean, that's one of the big things that's another attribute and a common trend where you'll see those knocks, those late night dings, whether it's Lawrence Malone, you or Jensen or whoever, and you're looking at the clock and you're like, it is literally 8:30 right now on the East Coast. And Jensen he just threw a ding out there for an MAPD and an FE sale. You see those things regularly, and it's a good point to touch on, which is why I want to ask you about it. And then as we kind of start to work on closing out here, let's talk about what you look for in the carriers that you work with. I know who you write with, but I like to ask the question because it's different for everybody. What do you look for in the carriers that you work with? Is it simplicity? Is it point of sale decision? Is it billing? What do you look for in the carriers that you write with, and who are you writing with?
I'm a simplicity guy for sure. I like the path of least resistance most of the time. So I'm a big fan of EAPs. I run a lot of appointments. Whenever I first started, I liked phone interviews the best because it gives you an immediate decision. You know you're going to get paid a day or two later. There's no papers to send in. Phone interviews was where I came from on the phone. That's where I was most comfortable. But I've transitioned. I really like e-apps when possible, or even paper apps over phone interviews, which I don't recommend for new producers at all. But it comes back to time. You know, at the end of a sale, sometimes a phone interview, especially with certain clients that I can kind of tell, that phone interview can take some time. So I don't have the time to wait. I got 9 more appointments to see, you know, and it kind of, like you were saying with rapport, I used to build so much rapport, and I still do, but I don't have as much time as I used to. I would love to spend 30, 40 minutes just chit-chatting. I like that. Even if I don't get a sale, I just like talking to people most of the time. But I've kind of had to focus now on what's going to get me out of the door the fastest. So I'm like I said, I'm a simple guy. I want to do an e-app or a paper app and then head on to my next appointment.
Gotcha. And then last but not least, love closing the podcast out with this particular topic. We get a lot of feedback, a lot of text messages, a lot of emails on this one just because of the perspective. Whether it's somebody working internally with us now or somebody out there in podcast land that hears this, what would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned in this business since you got started?
Ride the wave. I think it's the biggest lesson because it is a grind, and you'll have good days, but you'll also have bad days. And some of the people you'll sit with, the house will smell like smoke so bad you'll leave. You'll stink, and they didn't even buy nothing. I've had to throw away shoes before, all kinds of stuff. But none of it really bothers me because I know that it's all for the end game. You know, I can potentially make as much money as doctors and surgeons and engineers by talking to these people. So I ride the wave and be appreciative. Even if they're arguing with you, if you don't get a sale, appreciate that these people that you're talking to, they're paying your bills. You know, whenever I go out in the morning, it's sometimes I'll joke, you know, I got to find somebody to find my mortgage today, pay my mortgage. And when they do, you got to appreciate it. And I even do some cool down. I talk to them after I sell them because they literally pay my bills just by being friendly and me getting to protect their family. I get to make a good living from it. So I'd say the biggest lesson is ride the wave. Don't get beat up. If they're rude to you, move on to the next one. You'll find the sweet one. But as long as at the end of the month you make as much money as you're content and happy with, and you feel passionate about what you do. I did a call on being confident and compassionate, because I love every single day. And I would be willing to do this phone call, this Friday call, every Friday, because I love talking about what I do because I enjoy it. But you won't be able to enjoy it if you get beat up.
We'll have to invite you to do it every Friday. Don't tempt me. You just threw it out there. We may have to invite you every Friday now. I appreciate you jumping on and spending some time with us, man. Always enjoy having you on, whether it's, one of the conference calls, training sessions we had done in the past. This was long overdue to kind of get the audience out there, everybody who sees the leaderboard, everybody who hears, the national call, which will be coming up here in a week or two. This Richard Landis, I keep hearing that name. I love the fact that we were able to introduce you to everyone that just may not know you. And I appreciate you spending some time with us today, buddy. It was fantastic.
I appreciate it, brother.
All right, guys, if you're out there listening in right now, that was awesome by Richard, obviously, and we really appreciate him jumping on, as I mentioned before. I will throw out there to you right now, listen to the conference call schedule and the podcast schedule that our team sends out. If you're right now not plugging in, plug in. You can go to iTunes. You can go to the Google Play Store. There are 4 shows. Those 4 shows are Medicare Madness. They are the Wednesday call, which we do, Ben Bowen and myself, called Insurance in Your Face. And then this one right here, which is obviously the In the Trenches. And then we also have EFES Live Throwback. You have 4 channels. I recommend you go subscribe to all 4, and you participate in those because you're going to have great nuggets of information. Peter and Cole bring the heat each and every Monday. They do a great job. You'll want to subscribe to that channel. If you haven't had a chance to talk to Peter and you're finally ready to make that leap and find out more, if you're producing consistently in final expense and you're ready to get going in Medicare, let us know. We'd love to help you get in touch with Peter and get yourself set up for success there. If you don't know how to do the podcast stuff, I just don't know how to do it, Chase, give us a call, 800-765-0711. We'd love to help you. And then regardless of the Medicare or the podcast or anything, if you're listening in right now, whether it's live or you're in podcast land right now, if you don't have a mentor, if you don't have someone that you're able to, pick the phone up and call them and ask for help, let us know. Once again, whether you're with us or you're in podcast land, we can help you out. We've got unbelievable people all across the United States. Some of them you heard mentioned on the call today that are willing to help you. And we've got leadership emerging as well that are out doing it successfully now. But it's important to have that lifeline. It's important to have that resource. There's so many people here that have a vested interest in your success, and we want to make sure that you have what you need. So feel free to give us a call anytime, 800-765-0711. Hope you guys have an awesome and productive Friday and finish to the week. And keep knocking and rocking, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks, guys.